Okay, so new manager, right? New company, maybe new industry even.
Hmm.
And you really want to make a difference.
Make your mark.
Exactly. But where do you even start? It can feel overwhelming.
Absolutely.
Well, good news. This deep dive is all about process management and improvement. We're going to help you get up to speed fast.
Faster than you can say TPS report.
Exactly. We've got excerpts from some really insightful articles on business process management, plus a presentation on quality management and all those process improvement methodologies.
It's like a cheat sheet for success, but way more fun. We're going to break down the essentials of process management, the stuff they should teach you in business school.
But don't.
But often, well, they miss the mark.
Totally. So think of this as your secret weapon, right? You can impress your boss and actually make your team's work life better.
Win-win.
Totally win-win. Okay, so before we get into the nitty-gritty of how W to improve processes, let's start with the basics.
Sounds good.
What is a business process anyway? I feel like that term gets thrown around a lot, but it can be kind of a fuzzy concept.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those buzzwords that gets overused, but really, at its core, a business process is just a series of steps with a clear beginning and end that all work together to achieve a specific business goal. It's like a recipe, but instead of baking a cake, you're achieving a business outcome.
Oh, I like that analogy. So it's not just about the steps themselves, it's about the purpose behind them. Like, the recipe isn't just a random list of ingredients. It's all in service of creating that delicious final product.
Exactly. And just like a recipe, a business process has ingredients, right? People, resources, tech, information. They all need to work together in a specific order to create value. And that's where BPM comes in business process management. It's about systematically analyzing, managing, and improving those processes to make them as efficient and effective as possible.
Got it. So it's not just about, like, automating tasks or making things faster. It's about making sure the process is actually achieving its intended goal and doing it in the best way possible.
Right. It's about working smarter, not just harder.
Okay, so that makes sense. But I'm curious, why should a new manager, someone who's still kind of figuring things out, why should they prioritize BPM? Isn't that something for, like, senior management or those dedicated process improvement teams?
That's a common misconception, you know. BPM isn't just for the higher-ups. In fact, it's especially valuable for new managers, those who are looking to make a real impact right away.
Oh, interesting. Why is that?
Well, think about it. You're coming in with fresh eyes, right? You're not as stuck in the we've always done it this way mentality. You're in a prime position to spot inefficiencies, suggest improvements, things like that.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's like being the new kid in school. You can see things that everyone else has just gotten used to.
Exactly.
But how does BPM, how does it actually translate into, like, tangible benefits for a new manager? Like, what's in it for them?
Well, let's put it this way. If you can identify a bottleneck in a process, you can streamline a workflow, maybe eliminate some unnecessary steps, you're directly contributing to the company's bottom line.
Okay.
You're saving time, reducing costs, improving efficiency. Imagine walking into your boss's office, data in hand, showing how you saved the company thousands of dollars by optimizing a process.
Oh, yeah.
Talk about a career booster.
That's a pretty compelling argument.
Yeah.
And it's not just about, like, impressing the higher-ups either, right? BPM can actually make a huge difference for your team's morale and their productivity.
Yeah.
I've been in situations where, like, clunky processes just suck the life out of everyone. And it's amazing how much even a little streamlining can boost team spirit.
Well, absolutely. When processes are efficient, well-defined, it reduces frustration, improves communication. It really empowers your team to do their best work. And plus, when you involve your team in that process improvement journey, you're fostering a culture of collaboration and ownership.
So it's a win-win all around. Good for the company, good for the team, good for your career. But before we get too excited about, like, transform the entire organization, let's break down the different approaches to BPM. Our sources mention a bunch of different methodologies, you know, Lean, Six Sigma, Agile, and honestly, it's a bit overwhelming. Where do we even begin with all of that?
Don't worry, it's not as complicated as it sounds. Think of these methodologies as different tools in your BPM toolbox.
Okay, I like that.
Each one has its own strengths, and they're suited for different situations. Let's start with lean. Lean is all about eliminating waste, anything that doesn't add value to the customer or to that final outcome.
Lean. It makes me think of those super organized, minimalist workspaces where everything has its place.
You're on the right track. But in the context of BPM, lean goes beyond just physical clutter. It's about identifying any step in the process that's unnecessary, redundant, or just slowing things down.
So it's not just about working faster, it's about working smarter by eliminating anything that's not truly adding value.
Exactly. And a key principle of lean is to involve the people who are actually doing the work. They're the ones who know the process best. And they can often spot inefficiencies that might be missed from, a higher level view.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so now what about Six Sigma? That one always sounds a bit intimidating to me.
Six Sigma is all about reducing variation and defects to near zero. It's a very data-driven methodology using statistical analysis to identify and eliminate the root causes of errors.
Near zero errors. Wow, that sounds pretty ambitious. What kind of scenarios would Six Sigma be best suited for?
You see, Six Sigma used a lot in manufacturing, healthcare, any industry where even small errors can have significant consequences. Imagine a factory producing millions of parts for a critical piece of equipment. Even a tiny defect rate could lead to major problems down the line.
Wow, yeah, that's a powerful example. So we've got Lean, which is all about eliminating waste. Six Sigma is about reducing errors. What about Lean Six Sigma? Is that like the ultimate process improvement power couple?
You got it. Lean Six Sigma combines the best of both worlds. You eliminate waste and reduce variation. It's a very powerful methodology for improving both efficiency and quality.
So it's like getting a 2-for-1 deal on process improvement.
Exactly. And then, of course, there's Agile BPM, which is all about speed and flexibility.
Agile. That one always makes me think of software development, where teams work in short sprints and they have to adapt quickly to changing requirements.
That's a great analogy. Agile BPM is perfect for environments where things are constantly changing. You need to be able to adapt quickly. It's about breaking down processes into smaller chunks, iterating frequently, getting constant feedback to make sure you're on the right track.
So it's less about like rigidly sticking to a plan and more about embracing change and continuous improvement.
Exactly. Now, the choice of methodology, it really depends on the specific challenges you're facing and the culture of your organization.
Okay, that makes sense. So we've got this like toolbox of methodologies, Lean Six Sigma, Agile. But how do we actually put them into practice?
That's where frameworks come in.
Frameworks, tell me more.
Frameworks are kind of like the recipe cards for process improvement.
Okay.
They provide a step-by-step guide to help you apply those methodologies we talked about in a structured way.
So frameworks are like the scaffolding for our process improvement project. They give us a structure to build on, a roadmap to follow.
That's a great way to put it.
Our sources mention two popular frameworks, the PDCA cycle and the BPM life cycle. Let's start with that first one, PDCA. What does that stand for again?
PDCA stands for Plan, Do, Check, Act.
Plan, Do, Check, Act.
Okay. It's a simple but incredibly powerful framework for continuous improvement. Imagine you're a scientist, right? Conducting an experiment.
Okay.
You start with a hypothesis, you test it out, analyze the results, then you refine your approach based on what you learned.
Right.
The PDCA cycle works in a similar way.
Okay. I'm starting to see how this applies to process improvement.
Yep.
So in the plan phase, we're basically defining the problem, setting goals, coming up with a plan of action.
Exactly. Let's say you're a new manager and you've noticed that your team's meetings, well, they're often unproductive. They tend to drag on and on.
Yeah, I've been there.
In that plan phase, you'd clearly define the problem. Maybe it's lack of an agenda or unclear objectives. You set a specific goal, like reducing meeting time by 20%, and then brainstorm those actions to achieve that goal.
Got it. So we've got our plan, and then it's time to put it into action, the do phase.
Right. This is where you implement those changes you planned. Maybe you start using a structured meeting agenda, assign clear roles and responsibilities, set time limits for each discussion point.
Okay, and then we move on to check, right? This is where we gather data, see if our changes are actually making a difference.
Exactly. You might track meeting duration, gather feedback from team members, measure your progress against those goals you set in the plan phase. That data helps you understand what's working, what's not, and where you might need to make adjustments.
And finally, the act phase. The moment of truth, we either stick with our plan, tweak it, or go back to the drawing board.
Exactly. If the data shows that your changes are having the desired effect, fantastic. You can continue with the current plan.
Great.
But if the results aren't what you expected, you loop back to the plan phase, refine your approach based on the data you've gathered, and then go through the cycle again.
So it's a continuous cycle of improvement, always learning and adapting based on real-world data.
That's the idea.
I like it. Okay, so now what about that BPM lifecycle? That one sounds a bit more comprehensive.
The BPM lifecycle is a broader framework. It takes you through the entire journey of managing and improving a process from start to finish. It usually involves stages like process identification, process analysis, process redesign, process implementation, and process monitoring.
Okay, so it's like a roadmap for the whole process improvement project. Let's break it down, starting with process identification. What exactly is involved in that stage?
Process identification is all about getting a clear understanding of the process you're trying to improve. It's like taking inventory,
Yeah.
You need to know what you're working with before you can start making changes.
So if I'm a new manager, I need to really take a step back, observe how things are actually being done. Don't just rely on outdated manuals or assumptions.
Exactly. Talk to the people who are doing the work, walk through the process yourself, gather data on how long it takes, where the bottlenecks are, what the pain points are. You need that clear picture of the current state before you can even start thinking about redesigning it.
Got it. Okay, so we've identified the process. Now it's time to put on our detective hats, analyze it.
Right.
We need to figure out what's working, what's not, where the opportunities for improvement might be hiding.
Love the detective analogy. Process analysis is all about understanding the why behind the what. You're digging deep, trying to understand the root causes of inefficiencies, bottlenecks, errors, anything that's preventing the process from functioning at its best.
Okay, so it's not just about describing the process, it's about really understanding it.
Right.
Our sources mention a few techniques for process analysis, like data analysis, value stream mapping, and root cause analysis. Let's start with data analysis. What kind of data are we talking about here?
It really depends on the process you're analyzing. It could be cycle times, how long it takes to complete a task. It could be error rates, customer feedback, even employee surveys.
Okay.
The key is to gather data that can help you identify patterns, trends, outliers, anything that might be indicative of a problem or an area for improvement.
So if we see that a certain step in the process is consistently taking longer than others, that could be a sign of a bottleneck.
Exactly. Or if you see a spike in customer complaints related to a particular part of the process, that's a clear signal that something needs to be addressed. Data analysis can really help pinpoint those areas that need your attention.
Okay, so data is our friend.
Yeah.
Now, what about this value stream mapping? That one sounds a bit more, specialized.
Value stream mapping is a great technique for visualizing the flow of materials and information through a process. It's especially helpful for processes that involve multiple steps, handoffs, maybe different departments working together.
So it's like creating a visual map of the entire process, start to finish, so we can see how everything fits together.
Exactly. And the beauty of value stream mapping is that it not only helps you identify bottlenecks and areas for improvement, but it also highlights the areas where the process is actually adding value for the customer.
Well, that's smart. So we can prioritize our improvement efforts, focus on the areas that are most impactful for the customer.
Right. Now, root cause analysis, that one can be a bit more intense.
Is it as intense as it sounds?
It can be, yeah. But it's also incredibly valuable. Root cause analysis is all about getting to the heart of a problem, not just treating the symptoms.
Right.
It's like being a detective. You're not just looking for the culprit. You're trying to understand their motives, how they were able to pull off the crime.
Okay, so instead of just putting a Band-Aid on a recurring problem,
Yeah.
we're really trying to figure out what's causing it in the first place.
Exactly. There are different tools for root cause analysis, like the 5 whys technique.
5 whys.
Yeah, you keep asking why until you get to the root of the issue.
It's like being a persistent toddler who won't stop asking why until they get a satisfactory answer.
Exactly. Sometimes the most obvious answer isn't the real reason why something is happening. You need to dig deeper, uncover that root cause, and then address it at that level.
Okay, so we've identified the process, analyzed it, uncovered the root causes of the problems. Now it's time to get creative and start brainstorming solutions, right? This is where the redesign phase comes in.
That's right. Process redesign is all about taking everything you've learned from the analysis stage and using it to develop a new and improved version of the process.
So we're not just like tweaking things around the edges, we're potentially overhauling the entire process if needed.
Exactly. It could involve eliminating unnecessary steps, simplifying complex workflows, automating tasks, reallocating resources, even completely restructuring the way work is done.
Wow, okay, so this is where it gets really exciting. Our sources mention several techniques for process redesign, like eliminating waste, simplifying the process, and automating tasks. Let's start with eliminating waste. This is where that lean thinking really comes into play, right?
Absolutely. Remember, waste is anything that doesn't add value for the customer or to that final outcome. It could be unnecessary steps, delays, rework, excess inventory, even just information that's not being used effectively.
So it's like decluttering our process, getting rid of anything that's not serving a real purpose.
Exactly. And often, the best way to identify waste is to involve the people who are actually doing the work. They're the ones on the front lines. They can often spot those inefficiencies that might be missed from, a higher level view.
Makes sense. Okay, now what about process simplification? I feel like processes tend to get more and more complex over time, like those bureaucratic nightmares where you need a dozen signatures just to get a simple request approved.
Oh, I hear you. Processes definitely become overly complex over time with too many steps, handoffs, approvals, decision points. Process simplification is all about streamlining the process, making it easier to understand and follow, and reducing the risk of errors or delays.
So it's like taking a tangled mess of yarn and, untangling it, making it smoother and easier to work with.
Exactly. And then there's automation, using technology to take over those repetitive, rule-based tasks.
This is where we can really leverage the power of tech to make our lives easier.
Yeah, absolutely. Automation can be a game changer for process improvement. It can free up employees from those tedious tasks, reduce the risk of errors, and speed up processes significantly.
Okay, I'm sold. Our sources mentioned a few types of automation, like rule-based automation, process-driven automation, and even AI-powered automation. What's the difference between these?
Rule-based automation is the simplest form. It's about setting up those if this, then that rules to trigger specific actions.
Okay.
For example, if an email arrives from a certain sender, it could be automatically forwarded to a specific department.
Right, pretty straightforward.
Now, process-driven automation, that's a bit more sophisticated. It involves using software to automate an entire process from start to finish based on a predefined workflow.
So we're basically taking those process maps we created earlier and turning them into automated workflows.
Exactly. The software can handle everything from routing tasks and information to approvals, notifications, even data entry. It's like having a digital assistant who can handle those repetitive tasks without needing any human intervention.
That sounds amazing. Okay, and what about this AI-powered automation? Is that where things get really futuristic?
AI-powered automation is still evolving, but it has incredible potential to revolutionize the way we work. It involves using artificial intelligence and machine learning to automate tasks that traditionally require human judgment or decision-making.
So instead of just following a set of rules, the software can actually learn and adapt over time.
Exactly. For example, you've got those AI-powered chatbots that can handle customer inquiries and resolve issues without any human involvement.
Wow, that's pretty impressive. Okay, so we've redesigned our process, identified opportunities for automation. Now it's time to put our plan into action, right? The implementation phase.
That's right. Implementation is where the rubber meets the road.
Okay.
It's about taking that beautifully redesigned process and making it a reality.
But it's not just about flipping a switch, right? There's a lot more to it than just like rolling out the new process and expecting everyone to magically adapt.
You're absolutely right. Implementation requires careful planning, communication, and execution. You need to make sure everyone involved understands the new process, knows their roles and responsibilities, has the tools and resources they need to succeed.
So training is a key part of this implementation phase.
Absolutely. You need to provide clear instructions, documentation, maybe even hands-on training to help people get up to speed with the new process. And it's not just about telling people what to do, it's about explaining the why behind the changes.
Yeah, people are much more likely to embrace change if they understand the reasons for it, how it will benefit them, right?
Exactly. And communication is crucial throughout that whole implementation phase. Keep people informed about the progress, address any concerns they might have, and be open to feedback and suggestions.
It's about making people feel like they're part of the process, not just like victims of it.
Exactly. And don't forget about testing and monitoring. Before you roll out the new process to the entire organization, it's a good idea to pilot it with a smaller group first. Identify any kinks or issues that need to be addressed.
So it's like a soft launch before the big premiere.
Exactly. And once the new process is fully implemented, you need to continue monitoring it, make sure it's working as intended, make any necessary adjustments. Process improvement is an ongoing journey, not a destination.
So it's not a set it and forget it kind of thing.
Not at all. You need to continuously evaluate the process, gather data, solicit feedback, be open to making tweaks and refinements along the way. The world's constantly changing. Your processes need to be able to adapt.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about methodologies, framework, the entire BPM lifecycle. But there's one more crucial aspect of process improvement we need to address.
And what's that?
Change management.
Ah, yes, the human element of process improvement.
Exactly. Implementing a new process often involves significant changes to the way people work. And those changes can be met with resistance if they're not handled carefully.
Oh, for sure. Change can be scary for people, especially in a work environment. They might worry about their jobs, feel like they're losing control, or just simply resist anything that disrupts their routine.
So how can a new manager who's still kind of establishing themselves, how can they navigate those, choppy waters, get their team excited about change?
Communication is key. Absolutely key. And I'm not just talking about sending out a memo or making a quick announcement in a meeting. You need to be proactive, transparent, and genuinely engage with your team throughout that whole process improvement journey.
So involve them right from the start, not just like spring a new process on them out of nowhere.
Exactly. Explain why you're undertaking this process improvement initiative, what the goals are, how it will benefit both the team and the company, and be honest about the challenges. Acknowledge that there might be some bumps along the way, but emphasize that you're all in this together.
And I guess it's important to address those unspoken fears people might have. Like, will this new process make my job harder? Or even, will I become obsolete?
Absolutely. Be upfront about those concerns. Emphasize that process improvement is not about replacing people with robots. It's about making everyone's work more efficient and fulfilling. It's about freeing people up from those tedious tasks so they can focus on more meaningful work.
So instead of fearing automation, they should see it as an opportunity to level up their skills, take on more strategic roles.
Exactly. And don't underestimate the power of involving your team in the redesign process. Ask for their input, solicit their ideas, make them feel like they're part of the solution.
Right, because who knows the process better than the people who are actually doing the work, day in and day out?
Exactly. They're the ones who can often spot those inefficiencies and bottlenecks that might be missed from a higher level view. And when people feel like their voices are heard, they're much more likely to embrace the change.
Okay, so we've got Communication, transparency, involvement, those are all crucial for successful change management. What are some other tips for, I don't know, a new manager who's like leading a process improvement initiative for the first time? What should they keep in mind?
Be patient. Change doesn't happen overnight. People need time to adjust, learn new skills, adapt to new ways of working. Don't expect everyone to be on board immediately. There will be some resistance, there will be some grumbling, but with consistent communication and support, you can win people over.
So it's like running a marathon, not a sprint.
Exactly. And celebrate those small wins along the way. Acknowledge people's efforts, recognize their contributions, highlight the positive impacts that those process improvements are having.
It's like those motivational posters, Celebrate every milestone, no matter how small. But what about when things don't go according to plan? Because, it's inevitable there will be bumps in the road.
Of course. Don't be afraid to acknowledge when things aren't working as expected. Be open to feedback. Be willing to adjust your approach. Don't be afraid to go back to the drawing board if necessary.
So it's about being flexible, adaptable, not like rigidly sticking to a plan no matter what.
Exactly. Process improvement is an iterative process. You learn as you go, you adjust course as needed, and you're constantly striving to make things better.
This has been a super insightful deep dive into the world of process improvement. We've covered everything from like methodologies and frameworks to the nitty-gritty of change management. I feel like I've earned an honorary MBA in BPM.
I think you have. But remember, it's not about memorizing a bunch of acronyms or frameworks. It's about understanding those core principles of process improvement and then applying them in a way that makes sense for your specific situation.
Right. It's about using those tools and techniques to make work easier, more efficient, and ultimately more fulfilling for everyone involved.
Exactly. And if you ever get stuck, don't be afraid to reach out for help. There are tons of resources available, books, articles, online communities, even consultants who can guide you along the way.
And speaking of resources, don't forget to check out the show notes for this episode. We've compiled a list of links to some of the most helpful resources on process improvement, including tools, templates, even some inspiring case studies.
And one final thought for you to ponder. Think about your own personal life. What's one process that you do on a regular basis that could use a little bit of that BPM magic?
Ooh, that's a good one. It's easy to get caught up in, like, the work context. But these principles can apply to all aspects of our lives, right? Maybe it's how I manage my to-do list or how I plan my meals for the week or even how I pack for a trip. There's always room for improvement.
Exactly. And the beauty of process improvement is that it's a journey, not a destination. You're constantly learning, evolving, and finding new ways to make things better.
Well, on that note, we're going to wrap up this deep dive. We hope you found it insightful, inspiring, and maybe even a little bit life-changing. Remember, you have the power to transform not just your work, but your entire life, one process at a time.
Thanks for joining us on this journey. We'll see you next time for another deep dive into a fascinating topic. Until then, keep learning, keep improving, and keep making a difference in the world.